So on moving slides, one of these buttons is going to move them. I guess we'll figure that out. Anyway, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Okay, great. As was mentioned, I've been involved in the, I guess since the inception of the master's program at the University of Washington. And I think being here today is a good example of relationship building, if you will. We've made a pretty good investment in time and effort relative to that program. And it's been a real honor and a privilege to speak to the students. I had my own kind of mental question mark about how is this going to work in terms of a master's program and what is the quality of the students going to be and so forth. And it really has exceeded any of my expectations, I can tell you that. It's a great, great group of folks, many of which are working they're working individuals, working with a variety of companies on a global basis. So if any of you get an opportunity to participate, I'd encourage you to take them up on the opportunity because it really is a rewarding experience. These are really good students, and they're very focused on what they're doing. So I'm going to give a quick overview of Costco to put it in perspective what our logistics are. We heard from the previous speaker the challenges that go on relative to logistics, and it was a great presentation, and those are all real challenges. What you're going to hear a little bit more now is where the rubber meets the pavement, so to speak, relative to Costco, and what is it that we face in our supply chain. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the Urban Lab and our growth relative to the e-commerce business. In terms of where we are, we're the second largest U.S. retailer, 15th in the Fortune 500, and depending upon the day of the week, a $66 billion market cap. We just closed our financial year at the end of August, 1st of September, and we had $116 billion, that's in global sales, 103 million square feet, 213,000 employees, and approaching 2.5 million transactions. One of the things I want to talk about on that 144,000 square feet, we don't change the size of our footprint. You could be a warehouse manager in Seoul, Korea that's doing $500 million a year in sales. Or you could be a warehouse manager in Texas that might be doing 120 million, same size footprint. And that's where the rubber meets the pavement in terms of resupply, the logistics. How do you take care of a warehouse that's doing 4 times as much volume? And it's a lot of work, but we tend to figure it out. But we're always interested in new, better ideas. Our warehouse count, the most significant holdings are in the U.S., where we've broken 500. Canada is a very strong market for us. Mexico is a developing market, and you can see the rest of the countries. As a matter of course, we tend to go into these countries with 1 or 2 locations and sort of figure it out. What can we bring to the party? What do the membership base, what do they respond to? I can tell you in the case of Asia, one of our first countries we're into is in Japan. And in visiting the very first location we opened, which was in southern Japan, quite a number of years ago, there weren't a lot of people that came to the party. It started out very slow. Okay, what's this American company coming in here and telling us, what to do and how to shop and the packaging sizes and so forth. You think about it, it is a little antithetical to Asian lifestyle and the size of their homes and the size of their cars and so forth. That was quite a number of years ago. Now you can see we have 28 very successful locations in Japan, very strong business in Korea, growing business in Taiwan, growing in Australia and so forth. And the classic thing you'll see if you were to go into one of our locations in Japan, what you'll find is the 144,000 square foot sales floor, but you'll find parking below it and parking on top of it. And that's how we fit it all in an Asian environment. What you'll also find are 2 housewives that go shopping together, and they'll go in and buy our large packages of everything we sell, and then they divide it all up in the parking lot. Then some of them take half, the other one takes half, And it's amazing how people figure things out when they can get good quality and they can save money. And that's a very typical arrangement, throughout Asia. Membership, 47 million households, 85 million cardholders. We've actually seen a growth in the last 5 years of our renewal rate, which is very, very important to us. Because if you know our economic model, pretty much what we make as our bottom line is equivalent to the membership fees we charge. So in large ways, we're a membership buying service. But that renewal rate has just crept in the right direction year over year in the last several years. We consider ourselves to be an absolute pricing authority. It has to do with what our margin structure is and our overhead structure. We leverage everything off top line sales. And so our overhead factor, our SG&A, our selling and general administration, is right about 10%. So at $10 plus a penny, we start making money. And that does separate us from other channels of retail. And for the items we sell, which are a limited number of items, but for the items we sell, we think we can outpace anybody in terms of our pricing structure. Our employees, we're known to pay a pretty good package relative to pay and benefits. It does have a therapeutic effect on turnover. In a retail industry that has a high turnover, we have a very low turnover. In the distribution network that I oversee, which also has a high turnover as an industry, our turnover is something less than 5%. In the truck driving fleet that Costco runs, when you're in a trucking industry that's over 50% turnover, we're less than 5%. And so we invest in our employees, and it bears out in terms of our productivity and people showing up to work and wanting to be there and so forth. We think we have some great merchandise. The treasure hunt atmosphere is alive and well. We have repeated stories where someone wanted to go in and buy lettuce, but they don't leave with lettuce. They leave with other things. That's all part of the success for us. Quality is very important. That's been very important to us in our Asia growth. There's a real quality image to North American product, U.S. product particularly, whether it's meat, whether it's other food items. There's a strong perception that it's trustworthy, it's healthy, you can trust it, and that's done very well for us and our suppliers, because we've been able to open up new markets that our suppliers were not in, and now they are, and they're doing very well. And obviously continued growth is important to any company. Our code of ethics, very simple, obeying the law. We run a lot of trucking operations in many states and jurisdictions, some of which allow heavy haul type environments, and whatever it is we can, we want to run maximum weights, but legal weights, wherever we are. Taking care of our members are important to us. I've mentioned the employees. And respecting our suppliers. We have a limited number of suppliers, limited number of relationships, but they run very deep and they run long years. And so we tend to work things out. On occasions, we make changes, but we try to make sure we stay together when we can, and we part ways when we're just not aligned. Some quick volumes, $2.6 billion in TVs in our last financial year. This is an interesting story for some young lady who was successfully awarded this ring for $450,000 that we sold. And I think it tells an interesting story of faith relative to our company, that someone would spend this much money online and buy a diamond ring. We sell an awful lot of jewelry. A lot of it's margin driven because of what our margin structure is, but the quality has to be there. When you're into this sophisticated of a buyer, they're certainly going to get a second opinion on what it is they bought. Just an interesting story on our .com business. Our wine business continues to grow. The lady who runs our wine team has some of the most fun that we have out of all of our senior execs, because she gets to travel the world picking liquor and wine throughout the world. And our wine sales now are like 1.8 billion. Our fine wine sales are more than $1 billion. Produce, very important to us. It's an important member demand to have high quality produce. It does increase the frequency of shop, so that's very important to us as well. People need to come in frequently for fresh produce. One of our biggest problems is the supply side is we can't get enough of the items that our members would like to have. That's a constant problem for our buying group. Some large numbers on hot dogs and sodas. Just on that trade relationship item I talked about before, at one time it was advertised as a hot dog and a Coke, and now it's a hot dog and a soda, because we couldn't reach agreement, with our supplier on pricing and how we were going to maintain that price of $1.50 that we've had since the beginning. And the same thing with a hot dog. We ended up opening our own hot dog manufacturing operation in order to manage the cost. And now we sell that item within our deli, and it's one of our top-selling deli items. So we've leveraged it, not only taking care of the food court, but we've turned it into something that's just a great item for us. Prescriptions, every year when we have our shareholders meetings, we get little news clips of how our pricing compares to the general retail market. And it's the kind of advertising you can't buy. It just goes on and on and on about how sharp our pricing is relative to prescriptions. Obviously, it goes without saying, very important to our members. Hearing aids, we've taken an item that, a lot of people have not necessarily gotten a straight deal on how those kinds of things are priced. And we're now on to our 7th model. It has state-of-the-art technology, and we've lowered the price. And it's still a very, profitable business for us. Gasoline, this has just blossomed in the last 10 years. We're up to $9 billion at the current low fuel prices, $9 billion, over 4 billion gallons. Again, aimed at frequency of shop. People come in. Because we're a membership club, we know what their cross-buying channels are. And when they come into fuel, they buy other things. And so on a global basis, we're adding gas stations everywhere we can in the world. Let me see here. And then Eecom. I don't have a lot of slides on Eecom. It is an important growing business for us. We believe we have quite a future for the limited number of SKUs. With all respect to the Amazon folks, people ask us about, well, what are we going to be? And we say, well, we're not going to be an Amazon. That's and I say that only in the sense of the number of items we intend to sell. We intend to stay true to what we're good at, which is a limited number of SKUs, best possible pricing, and we'll just see where that takes us, and we just keep going. But we have a lot of growth within e-commerce. And that takes us to our depot system that I oversee. Our depot system, and if we're lucky at the end, we'll show you a real quick video. We're a full truckload in, full truckload out. Our merchandise, the vast, vast majority, some 90% of our merchandise, we sell it before we have to pay our suppliers. And so our inventory turns so rapidly by design that the merchandise is within our distribution network literally a matter of minutes and sometimes hours, but we look at it more like minutes. And it's received on one side of the dock, it's loaded on the other, and it's going down the road and delivered that evening to the warehouses. That ability to be able to sell it before we have to pay for it is a very important part of our business model, because we don't have those overhead costs that other people have. So in many companies, and it was alluded to by the previous speaker, logistics is not always at the top of anybody's tier of what they spend time on. At ours, I report directly to our president and CEO, and if I need something, I get it, and as long as I'm reasonable in terms of what I'm asking for. But he's used to signing off on expenses of new depots, new tractors, trailers, equipment, or whatever, because we have an important mission of keeping the costs low in terms of how we distribute product. This is our grid in North America, where we have our so-called depots across Canada, the US. It really has been built based on cost. We've added new depots when we can reduce our freight costs to justify and have a return on investment. We don't do it because it would be nice. We don't do it for any other reason except reducing costs. Our most recent depot we opened was outside of Detroit. We had a depot outside of Chicago, and our growth in the Midwest is so strong. When we finished the return on investment analysis, we could absolutely justify the cost of another depot outside of Detroit, and that opened within the last year. This is our global depot system. Our depots are all company owned and operated. We buy for cash, build for cash. We don't rely on outsiders in terms of how we do our distribution functions as it relates to the facility, that distribution end of it. We have a new depot that's about to go under construction in Australia, a new depot in Taiwan, a new depot in the UK. We're moving into a new depot outside of Seoul in Korea. And we have a new depot in southern Japan. And we just had signed off a new depot campus in outside of Tokyo. The history of our distribution network started in 1988. This year we're celebrating the 40th year of the Warehouse Club business, which started in San Diego in 1976. And that was the first Warehouse Club, was Price Club, and then there was a merger between the Price Company and Costco, and now we have Costco Wholesale. When it became apparent that we could not take enough deliveries, direct deliveries from the suppliers to the Costco warehouses, that's when we started the distribution network, our cross-dock depot. In 1988, it was a whopping 60,000 feet, and it had sales that value the goods that came across the dock at sell of $71 million, and it sent out 1,600 loads, and it would send out a whopping 6 loads a day. Today, this is on a global basis. We have 48 depots, 11 million square feet, $83 billion in sales, 875,000 loads, and we're doing 3,200 loads a day, so twice a day of what we did in a year when we first started the depot system. Eecom, we have a blend of drop ship fulfillment and company-owned and operated facilities. This will evolve over time, where we expect will be more and more Costco-owned and operated distribution. But it's an evolution depending upon cost. To the extent that the supplier can resupply at a less expense than we can, they're going to do it. At such time as we can do a better job at a lower cost, then we'll be the ones that do the fulfillment. This is our growth estimates on Eecom. It's one of the reasons why we wanted to be right at the ground floor of the urban lab. We're going to see a lot of growth. A lot of our growth are going to be in major metropolitan areas in the U.S. And whatever it is we learn, and we hope to learn a lot from the lab in Seattle area and in the Northwest, it'll apply in San Francisco and New York and Chicago and so forth and so on. So, and another thing in terms of growing relationships, when we were asked to be involved in that, one of our long trade partners is UPS, and we were able to attract them at a very high level. They made a very significant corporate commitment to the lab, and they want to work with the university and learn from the university, and it'll be an interesting outing. We're excited about where all that's going to go as time goes on. We're going to see a lot of growth in Eecom, and it's going to take innovation in order to take care of it at a reasonable expense. I mean, anybody can fly something somewhere at a great expense. The question is, how can you get it there at a more affordable cost? We do use our Eecom, we use our depot system for Eecom distribution. Most of this is less than truckload quantities, large palletized items. We only have 2 depots that do small pack fulfillment, vitamins, apparel, things like that, principally out of our Tracy, California depot and our Frederick, Maryland depot. Today's volumes, we have about 13 million units we shipped this last year. About 40% of our units are shipped through the depot, about 33% of our sales, and the rest is all drop shipped by suppliers. This was our first entree into the distribution world for Eecom, where we built a company-owned and operated facility that we designed from the ground up for Eecom fulfillment. This is outside of Baltimore in Frederick, Maryland. That other facility you see is our cross-dock depot that we have in that same market. So we put this on the same campus, as you can see, with plenty of room for future expansion. We collaborated with a variety of equipment suppliers, systems providers, and actual operators, people like UPS, on how to lay this out. A lot of conveyor systems, case sealers, sortation facilities. We load everything the way UPS wants it to be offloaded, which is non-palletized. They just want it loaded on the floor because that's how they offload at their facilities. So we actually use their equipment providers on how we load out the UPS destined goods. Another area on logistics, getting off the urban lab for a minute, is what we are now in next year in 17. We're going to be going through a complete transformation of return depots, reverse logistics. This is a big business for us. It's some $2.5 billion worth of items that members bring back. And I know you're all familiar with our return policy. If you don't like it, you bring it back, you get your money back, and that's that. That's great for the members, but then we have to figure out what to do with all this. And we've been operating individual return operations at each one of the Costco warehouses. And we went through a pilot and a study of how could we use the investment we've made in our depot system, and could there be a return if we were to bring everything back from our warehouses back to the depot system. And instead of shipping eaches, we ship pallets back to our suppliers. And thus we've got into the reverse logistics. Ann Rivers, who's here with me today, heads this up and reports directly to me. We expect a major savings in freight by doing this consolidation, a major reduction in administrative costs on receiving and transactions between us and our suppliers, and a huge reduction as it relates to our suppliers, some 95%, where we're not having to call and email and fax and deal with a return item, because everything will be consolidated and it'll be streamlined. I want to just real quickly, in terms of our world within logistics, and we're going to repeat this story when we get further into the urban lab, but what we've found over the years is a lot of our best ideas come from our workforce. That's how we develop the ideas to drive out cost, is from our hourly employees, our supervisors, our area managers. It comes from our workforce. It comes from within. And we did a tally recently of all the changes we've made in 10 years within the depot system. And the way that tallies up is in '06, our handling expenses as a percentage of the retail sell of what goes through the depots was 0.69%, which is a relatively small percent, but when you multiply times the billions of dollars we have, it's a lot of money. And taking into account the streamlining that we've done over that 10-year period, we actually been able to lower that cost down to 0.62%, which by our sales numbers is about a $48 million savings by taking these best of the best ideas and actually implementing them. And we did this for the benefit of our depot staff, which I was mentioning earlier to some other folks, that we gave a very, very early morning what we call a perspective, an employee perspective, to our local distribution center here in the Northwest. And I wanted to do a recap for them so they can see, you know, what are the ideas that they came up with and what effective they had on the company. And they're numerous. I'm not going to go through all these, but we've made a lot of operational improvements to what we call our cross-dock operation. It can be equipment, palletization, delivery schedules, a whole variety of different things that have been implemented over the years, and how we've partnered within the company with our merchandising group, our traffic group, and our suppliers in order to make these things happen. And just one after another of small ideas that all add up to big bucks. Traffic enhancements we've made, facility enhancements we've made, things like solar energy, the design of our buildings, which, you know, people may not think of that a whole lot, but in our world, when you're moving some 50 million pallets, if you can move them 25 feet less, that's not a small deal. It's a big deal. Other projects that are works in progress, like RFID, which we're going to get into this year. We're going to start deploying RFID at the pallet level, not the consumer level. Just a little quick evolution of when we started the depot system, you would see throughout the warehouse distribution world hand jacks. The largest piece of equipment we could buy when we started the depot in 1988 was a dual pallet jack like this. We ended up having to go to the manufacturer to say, we need something bigger, it needs to haul more. And so they came up with a triple jack, and then we had to come up with a quad jack. And when we converted to block pallets, 48 by 40 block pallet, we can actually haul 10 pallets. And about 90% of what we offload in our depots, we offload with pallet jacks, like this. And so we really do maximize the pay and benefits we pay to our employees. We leverage that. And we're able to offload in minutes what will take other suppliers literally hours in terms of how they offload. Fast Pass, one of the things that's unique about us, because we have a limited number of SKUs, shopkeeper units, and our suppliers, we have such great relations with our suppliers, they load to us accurately to the point where we actually receive at our guard booth. And so we use this pager system on how we signal to a truck driver. They don't even get out of their trucks when they deliver to Costco. They back up, they're offloaded, and they leave. And then this will be a little vignette, if we can, I don't know how we activate it. It's a day in the life of one of our depots. On the right-hand side will be the receiving dock. And the left-hand side, they're offloading inbound freight. The left-hand side, they're putting in the shipping lines that are all designated for a local warehouse. And those are being offloaded by a separate crew from the people that are going through the receiving. We have some facilities like our Miraloma facility in Southern California. They'll receive some 700 truckloads a day of inbound merchandise. They'll consolidate that down to less than 400 loads by mixing heavy and light freight. That's how we maximize outbound freight dollars, is mixing heavy and light freight. And then at the end of the day, they don't get the music, unfortunately, but and they clean the floors and go home. Anyway, that's a real quick overview relative to Costco. We're pleased to be a part of the overall master's program, and we're pleased to be involved in terms of the urban freight lab as well. So